I never thought I'd be the kind of mother-in-law who changes her will out of spite. I always believed family was about unconditional love and support. But when you're lying in a hospital bed, unable to even lift yourself to use the bathroom, you discover who truly cares about you and who's just waiting for you to leave this world so they can claim what you've built. My daughter-in-law Tori made it perfectly clear which category she fell into. What she didn't realize was that I had already made arrangements to ensure everyone got exactly what they deserved. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eleanor Wilson. At 72, I've outlived my husband Richard, survived breast cancer, and built a life I'm proud of. Richard and I started with a single furniture store in downtown Lakeside and eventually expanded to 15 locations across New England. We sold the business 5 years ago for enough money to ensure our family would be comfortable for generations. Richard passed away 2 years later, a sudden heart attack while tending to his beloved garden. I miss him every day, especially his laugh, which could fill our entire house with warmth. After Richard's death, I stayed in our family home, a beautiful colonial overlooking the lake that had been our sanctuary for 4 decades. I remained active on several local charity boards and kept my weekly lunch dates with Grace, my neighbor, of 30 years. I wasn't ready for a retirement community, despite my son James and his wife Victoria dropping hints about simplified living whenever they visited. "Mom, you don't need all this space," James would say, gesturing vaguely around my living room. "Think about how nice it would be to have everything on one floor, with people taking care of the maintenance." Victoria would nod eagerly, adding, "Sunset Assisted Living has beautiful units available right now. We could go tour them this weekend." I always smiled politely and changed the subject. What they didn't understand, or perhaps understood all, too well, was that this house wasn't just a collection of rooms to me. It was where Richard and I had built our life together. It was where we had raised our sons, James and Michael. It was home. But everything changed 3 months ago when I slipped on an icy patch on my front steps. Dr. Phillips delivered the news with characteristic directness. "Eleanor, your hip needs replacing. There's no getting around it." He explained that the recovery would be challenging. I would need help for at least 6 to 8 weeks, someone to assist with meals, medications, and mobility. "Is there someone who can stay with you?" he asked, his expression concerned. "Or we should discuss temporary care facilities." "I'll talk to my family," I assured him. That evening, I called James, who lived just 30 minutes away in Hartford. His response was immediate concern, but when I mentioned needing someone to stay with me after the surgery, there was a pause. "Let me talk to Tori," he said. "We'll figure something out." 2 days later, they arrived for Sunday dinner, an unusual occurrence since they typically only visited once a month. James looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his napkin throughout the meal. Tori wore a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom," James finally said as I served coffee in the living room, "we've discussed your situation, and we think the best solution is for you to recover at our house. We can set up the guest room." Before I could respond, Tori jumped in. "It makes the most sense. James can drop you at physical therapy on his way to work, and I can help with meals and medications." Her tone was practical, rehearsed. I glanced at my son, whose eyes were fixed on his coffee cup. "That's very kind of you," I said carefully, "but I've been thinking I might hire a home health aide to help me here." Tori's expression tightened. "Eleanor, that's so wasteful. Why pay a stranger when family can help? Besides, our house doesn't have stairs to worry about." What she wasn't saying was also clear. She wanted me under their roof, where they could monitor me, and perhaps more importantly, where they could demonstrate their dutiful care. Victoria had always been conscious of appearances and how they might affect future allocations. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'd be more comfortable in my own home." James finally looked up. Mom, please be reasonable. The doctor said you'll need help for weeks. Your house isn't set up for someone with mobility issues. I felt a flash of irritation. This house has been my home for 40 years. I'm not invalid yet. Tori sighed dramatically. This isn't about your independence, Eleanor. It's about your safety. James and I have discussed it, and we think this is best. You've discussed it, I repeated, noting how my input wasn't part of their equation. Yes, and we've made arrangements. James has already taken family leave from work. I've cleared out the guest room. We're ready for you. Her tone suggested the matter was settled. I looked at my son, hoping to see some acknowledgement that this decision should be mine, but he simply nodded in agreement with his wife. In that moment, I realized something had shifted in our family dynamic. Since Richard's death, I had somehow transitioned from matriarch to dependent in their eyes. I'll think about it, I said finally, unwilling to create conflict, but equally unwilling to surrender my autonomy so easily. Tori's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened slightly. The surgery is in 2 weeks, Eleanor. There isn't much time to think about it. After they left, I sat in Richard's old leather chair and tried to imagine staying in their house. James and Tori had a beautiful colonial in an exclusive neighborhood, tastefully decorated but lacking warmth. Their home always felt like a showpiece rather than a living space. The thought of being confined there, dependent on Tori's assistance, made my chest tighten with anxiety. I picked up the phone and called my younger son, Michael, who lived in Seattle. Unlike James, who had followed his father into the family business, Michael had charted his own course, becoming an environmental engineer. He had always been my free spirit. Mom, if you need me to come, I'll be on the next flight, he said immediately after I explained the situation. No, honey, that's not necessary. I just wanted your perspective. Well, if you're asking whether you should move in with James and Tori. He hesitated. Let's just say I wouldn't. I chuckled. Michael had never hidden his feelings about his sister-in-law. That's not very helpful. Look, Mom, you have the resources to hire the best care available. Why would you subject yourself to Tori's attention? He had a point. Money wasn't an issue. Richard had ensured that. But I also understood family obligations and didn't want to create a rift. James offered to take leave from work, I said. James offered, or Tori volunteered him? Michael asked pointedly. Before I could respond, he continued, Mom, I love you, and I want you to recover comfortably. If you stay in your own home, I'll fly out for the surgery and the first week. Then we can arrange for professional help. The relief I felt at his offer confirmed what I already knew in my heart. That would be wonderful, Michael, thank you. The next morning, I called James and told him I'd decided to recover at home with Michael's help for the first week, followed by professional care. There was a long silence on the line. Michael's coming? He finally asked, surprise evident in his voice. He didn't mention anything to me. I just spoke with him last night. He offered immediately. Another pause. Mom, that's not a good plan. Michael can't stay indefinitely, and those home health aides are expensive and unreliable. We've already prepared everything here. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. James, I've made my decision. I appreciate your concern, but I'll be more comfortable in my own home. Let me talk to Tori, he said, an edge of frustration in his voice. She's put a lot of effort into this. Later that evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Tori standing there alone, her expression serious. She had changed from her work clothes into casual attire, but still looked polished, her caramel-highlighted hair perfectly styled, her nails freshly manicured. Eleanor, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We need to talk. I led her to the living room, where she perched on the edge of the sofa, declining my offer of tea. James told me about your alternative arrangements, she began, her tone measured. I have to say, I'm hurt that you would rather hire strangers than accept our help. I took a seat across from her. Tori, it's not about rejecting your help. It's about where I'll be most comfortable during recovery. She leaned forward. Is this about Michael? Because if you wanted family involved, James is right here. He's taking time off work for you. Which I appreciate, I said carefully. But this is my decision. Her expression hardened slightly. Eleanor, I don't think you understand the implications of what you're choosing. We're talking about weeks of recovery. Professional care for that long will cost thousands of dollars. I'm aware of the costs. It's just so wasteful, she insisted. That money could be going toward Olivia's college fund or… She stopped herself, perhaps realizing how her priorities were being revealed. My medical decisions aren't about financial efficiency, Tori. She sighed, changing tactics. I'm concerned about you being alone in this big house. What if you fall again? What if there's an emergency in the middle of the night? The service I'm considering provides 24-hour care if needed. Tori stood and began pacing, her frustration visible. You're being stubborn, Eleanor. This isn't about your independence. It's about what's practical. Perhaps to you, I said, remaining calm. To me, it's very much about my independence. She stopped and turned to face me. Is that what this is? Some kind of statement? Because if you're trying to prove something by throwing money away on hired help when your family is willing to care for you, I'm not trying to prove anything, I interrupted, my patience wearing thin. I'm making the choice that's best for my recovery. Tori stared at me for a long moment, then collected her purse. Fine. Do what you want, but don't expect James to be available whenever you call. He has responsibilities to his wife and daughter, too. After she left, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room, replaying our conversation. Tori had always been polite, if somewhat distant, during family gatherings. She complimented my cooking, asked appropriate questions about my charity work, and never forgot my birthday. But beneath that veneer of consideration, there had always been a calculation, a awareness of what our relationship could mean for her future security. Richard had built substantial wealth, and though I'd never discussed the specifics of our estate planning with James or Tori, they were certainly aware of the general scope. Our furniture business had been sold for millions, and there were investment properties, stock portfolios, and of course, this house, prime real estate on Lakeside's most desirable street. The next morning, I called Martin Reynolds, Richard's longtime business partner and our family attorney, and scheduled an appointment. Martin had handled our estate planning after Richard's diagnosis, but we had made some provisional arrangements that I now wanted to revisit. Eleanor, Martin greeted me warmly when I arrived at his office 2 days later. It's always wonderful to see you, though I gather this isn't a social call. I explained my upcoming surgery and the situation with James and Tori. Martin listened attentively, his expression revealing nothing. I see, he said when I finished. And how can I help you today? I'd like to review my estate plan, I said. Make some adjustments. Martin nodded, pulling up my file on his computer. Richard set things up quite thoroughly. The primary estate passes to you, of course, and then splits equally between James and Michael upon your passing, with trusts established for the grandchildren's education. Yes, and that general structure should remain, I confirmed. But I'd like to make some specific changes regarding the house and business properties. For the next hour, Martin and I discussed various options. I wasn't acting out of pure emotion. I had been considering these changes since observing Tori's increasing interest in my finances after Richard's passing. The conversation with her had merely confirmed what I already suspected about her priorities. As I left Martin's office, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The changes wouldn't be finalized until after my recovery, but having a plan in place gave me peace of mind. I wasn't being vindictive. I was being pragmatic about the kind of care and consideration I valued. The day before my surgery, Michael arrived from Seattle, bringing a welcome energy into the house. He helped me prepare everything for my return, from the hospital, rearranging furniture to create clear pathways, installing grab bars in the bathroom, setting up a temporary bedroom on the first floor in Richard's old study. James and Tori visited that evening, ostensibly to wish me well, but clearly surprised to see the modifications already underway. Tori's eyes widened as she took in the hospital bed now occupying Richard's study. "You've been busy," she remarked, her tone suggesting we had overreacted. Michael smiled pleasantly. "Just making sure Mom has everything she needs for a smooth recovery." "We could have done this at our house," Tori said, directing her comment to me rather than Michael. "Without all this disruption to your home." "It's not a disruption," I replied. "It's an adaptation." Dinner was a tense affair, with Tori making pointed remarks about the expense of the equipment rentals and the home health aide I had scheduled. James remained largely silent, occasionally attempting to steer the conversation toward neutral topics. As they were leaving, Tori hugged me stiffly. "We'll visit you in the hospital tomorrow after the surgery," she said. "And James will check on the house while Michael is with you." "That won't be necessary," Michael interjected smoothly. "I've arranged for everything to be taken care of." Tori's smile tightened. "Family should be involved, Michael. You can't just fly in from across the country and take over." "I'm not taking over," he replied, his voice level. "I'm helping Mom execute her own plan." After they left, Michael turned to me with a raised eyebrow. "Was Tori always this controlling, or has she gotten worse?" I sighed. "She means well, in her way." Even as I said it, I wasn't entirely convinced. "Mom, you don't have to make excuses for her. It's okay to acknowledge that her help comes with strings attached." He was right, of course. Tori's assistance had always been transactional, given with an expectation of future return, whether that was social capital, influence over James, or ultimately, inheritance. The surgery itself went smoothly. I woke in the recovery room to find Michael sitting beside me, his face breaking into a relieved smile when I opened my eyes. James and Tori arrived shortly after I was settled in my room, bringing flowers and a tablet loaded with e-books. "The doctor says you did great," James said, squeezing my hand. "A textbook procedure." Tori stood at the foot of the bed, her expression appropriate but detached. "We've set up a meal train with some of the neighbors," she announced. "Though I still think recovering at our house would have been easier for everyone." Michael shot her a look but said nothing, maintaining the peace for my benefit. The next 3 days in the hospital were a blur of pain medication, physical therapy assessments, and visits from the care team. Michael stayed with me much of the time, while James and Tori made brief, daily appearances, always during visiting hours, always with small gifts and updates about their daughter Olivia's activities. On the day of my discharge, I expected James to join Michael in bringing me home. Instead, only Tori arrived, explaining that James had an unexpected work emergency. "He feels terrible about it," she said, though her tone suggested mild inconvenience rather than sincere regret. "But I'm here to help get you settled." Michael handled the discharge paperwork while a nurse reviewed my home care instructions, with both of them. Tori nodded along, occasionally asking questions that revealed her assumption that she would be more involved in my care than I had planned. "I'll need your number to coordinate the medication schedule," she said to the home health aide who had arrived to accompany us. "Mrs. Wilson has already provided me with all the necessary contacts." The aide, a compassionate, experienced woman named Diane, responded professionally. Tori's expression flickered with surprise, then annoyance. "Well, as her family, we'll need to be kept informed." "Of course," Diane agreed, with Mrs. Wilson's permission. I could see Tori processing this response, the gentle but firm reminder that I remained in charge of my own care decisions, despite my temporary physical limitations. The ride home was quiet, with Tori making occasional comments about traffic or the weather. Once we arrived, Michael and Diane helped me inside and got me settled in the converted study while Tori hovered uncertainly in the doorway. "There's fresh food in the refrigerator," Michael told me. And Grace from next door dropped off a casserole. "The medication schedule is on the nightstand, and Diane will be here until 8 tonight. Then the night aide arrives." Tori stepped forward. "I could stay tonight instead of hiring someone else. Save you the expense." "That's very kind," I said, "but everything's arranged. You should go home to Olivia." A flash of irritation crossed her face. "Eleanor, I'm trying to help. I don't understand why you're so resistant to family assistance but perfectly willing to pay strangers." Michael intervened before I could respond. "Tori, Mom appreciates the offer, but the professional care is already scheduled. It's not personal." But it was personal, in many ways. It was about maintaining my dignity and independence. It was about receiving care from someone whose job was to help me recover, not someone who viewed caring for me as a chore or an investment in future inheritance. Tori left shortly after, promising that she and James would check in tomorrow. As the front door closed behind her, I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "You okay, Mom?" Michael asked, concern evident in his voice. "Just tired," I assured him, "and grateful you're here." The first week of recovery was the hardest. Pain management, limited mobility, and the frustration of dependence all tested my patience. Michael was a godsend, attentive without hovering, helpful without taking over. He made me laugh even on the worst days, reminiscing about family vacations and Richard's terrible dad jokes. James visited daily, usually alone during his lunch break. He seemed torn, genuinely concerned about my recovery, but also clearly uncomfortable with the arrangement. One afternoon, as Michael stepped out to take a work call, James broached the subject. "Mom, I wish you would reconsider coming to stay with us once Michael leaves. Tori feels like you don't trust her." I studied my son's face. So much like his father's, but lacking Richard's quiet confidence. "This isn't about trust, James. It's about what makes me comfortable during a difficult time." "But hiring full-time care is so expensive. We could have—" "James," I interrupted gently, "money isn't the issue here. My comfort and independence are." He fidgeted with his wedding ring, a nervous habit he'd developed in recent years. "Tori's upset. She thinks you're deliberately keeping her at arm's length." "I'm sorry she feels that way," I said sincerely, "but my medical decisions aren't about Tori's feelings." He looked at me with a mixture of frustration and concern. "You've been different since Dad died. More distant." The observation stung because there was truth in it. I had withdrawn somewhat after Richard's passing, partly from grief, but also from a growing awareness of how others, particularly Tori, viewed me now. Not as Eleanor Wilson, woman of substance and partner to Richard, but as Eleanor Wilson, widow with assets. "I'm still finding my way without your father," I admitted. "That includes establishing boundaries that feel right to me." James nodded, though I wasn't sure he truly understood. Before he left, he hugged me awkwardly around my surgical precautions. "I love you, Mom. I just want what's best for you." "I know you do, sweetie. We just might have different ideas about what that is." Michael returned to Seattle after 10 days. Once I was past the most challenging phase of recovery, and the home health aid system was working smoothly. Before he left, he set up easy-to-use video calling on my tablet so we could talk daily. "Call me anytime, day or night," he insisted, "and I can be on a plane back here in hours if you need me." I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude for his unconditional support. "I'll be fine. You've done more than enough." With Michael gone, Tori intensified her efforts to insert herself into my care routine. She began stopping by unannounced, often when the home health aide was present, asking detailed questions about my medication schedule or physical therapy progress. "I was thinking I could drive you to PT tomorrow," she announced during one such visit. "Save you the service fee for the medical transport." "Thank you, but it's already arranged," I replied. She glanced around the room, noting the fresh flowers, neatly organized medication, and the array of prepared meals in specialized containers. "This all seems excessive. You know, if you were at our house, we could have managed without all these expenses." I recognized the comment for what it was, not concern for my financial welfare, but anxiety about resources being wasted that could eventually have been part of her inheritance. "I'm comfortable with my decisions, Tori." She sat on the edge of the visitor's chair, perfectly postured as always. "James and I have been talking. We think you should consider downsizing after you've recovered. This house is too much for you to manage alone." It wasn't the first time they had suggested this, but the timing felt particularly insensitive. "I'm not ready to leave my home," I said firmly. "It's not about being ready," she countered. "It's about being practical. This house is valuable real estate that's not being utilized fully. You could sell it, buy a nice condo at Sunset Assisted Living, and invest the difference." I studied her face, the practiced concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Why are you so interested in my living arrangements, Tori?" The question caught her off guard. We are just concerned about you living alone, especially after this fall." "I've lived alone for 2 years now. One accident doesn't invalidate my independence." She sighed dramatically. "Eleanor, at some point you need to accept that you're getting older. James and I are trying to help you plan for the future." "My future is my responsibility," I reminded her. "And I have plans in place." Something in my tone must have alerted her because she looked at me sharply. "What kind of plans?" I smiled pleasantly. "Just arrangements that make sense for my stage of life." Tori's visits became more frequent after that conversation, often bringing Olivia along as if to remind me of the family connection. My granddaughter was a joy, 16 and full of passionate opinions about everything from climate change to fashion trends. Unlike her mother, Olivia's affection seemed genuine and uncomplicated. "Gran, can I bring some friends over next weekend?" she asked. During one visit, "We have a history project, and you tell the best stories about growing up here." Before I could respond, Tori interjected. "Olivia, your grandmother is recovering. She doesn't need a house full of teenagers right now." I saw the disappointment on Olivia's face and made a decision. "Actually, I'd love the company. Saturday afternoon would be perfect." Tori's mouth tightened, but she said nothing, likely unwilling to contradict me in front of Olivia. Later, as they were leaving, Tori hung back after Olivia went to the car. "Eleanor, I wish you had discussed this with me first. Hosting teenagers is a lot of work, even without your limitations." "I'm not hosting a party, Tori. I'm spending time with my granddaughter and her friends. Still, I should have been consulted. I'm responsible for Olivia." "And I'm responsible for myself," I reminded her, "including deciding who visits my home." She studied me for a long moment. "You've changed since the surgery. You're more assertive." I smiled. "Perhaps I'm just more clear about what matters to me now." What I didn't tell her was that my conversation with Martin Reynolds had continued even during my recovery. We had video calls weekly, finalizing the changes to my estate plan. The experience of being vulnerable, physically dependent but determined to maintain my autonomy, had crystallized my thinking about the future. 6 weeks after my surgery, I received clearance from my doctor to begin driving again and reduce My home health aid hours. I celebrated by inviting both my sons and their families to Sunday dinner, the first I would cook myself since the operation. Michael flew in for the weekend, arriving Saturday morning with an armful of fresh flowers and my favorite chocolates from Seattle. James, Tori, and Olivia arrived Sunday afternoon precisely at the agreed time, bearing a store-bought dessert. "Mom, should you be standing so much?" James asked, watching me move between the stove and counter with my new subtle limp. "Dr. Phillips says moderate activity is good for my recovery," I assured him. "Besides, Michael has been helping with the heavy lifting." Tori surveyed the kitchen, noting the extensive preparation. "You could have asked us to bring something more than just dessert. Or we could have hosted at our house." "I wanted to cook," I said simply. "It feels good to be back in my kitchen." Dinner itself was pleasant enough, with Olivia chattering about college applications and Michael sharing stories about his latest environmental project. James spoke little, seeming distracted, while Tori maintained her usual polite but reserved demeanor. As we moved to the living room for coffee, I decided it was time. "Before dessert, I'd like to talk to all of you about something important." James and Tori exchanged glances while Michael looked at me curiously. "This experience, the surgery, the recovery, has made me think a lot about the future," I began. "About what matters to me and what kind of legacy I want to leave." Tori sat up straighter, her attention suddenly focused. James looked nervous. "I've decided to make some changes to my estate plan," I continued. "Nothing dramatic, but adjustments that better reflect my wishes." "Mom, is this really necessary?" "Right now," James interrupted, "you're still recovering." "My mind is quite clear, James," I assured him, "and these decisions aren't impulsive. I've been considering them for some time." I reached for the folder Martin had prepared for me and removed several documents. "First, I want you all to know that I've established a healthcare directive and durable power of attorney." I handed copies to both James and Michael. Michael will be my primary healthcare proxy, with James as the alternate. Tori's expression tightened, but she remained silent. "Second, regarding the estate itself, the financial assets will still be divided equally between James and Michael, with education trusts for the grandchildren." James nodded, visibly relieved. "However," I continued, "I've made specific provisions regarding the house and the commercial properties." Now Tori leaned forward slightly. "This house will not be sold upon my death. Instead, it will be placed in a trust for 5 years, during which time it will serve as a transitional home for women recovering from illness or domestic situations. After that period, Olivia will have the option to purchase it at a favorable rate if she wishes, or it will be sold and the proceeds added to her education trust." "What?" Tori exclaimed, unable to contain herself. "But this house is worth millions." I nodded calmly. "Yes, it is. And after helping others for 5 years, it will benefit my granddaughter, either as a home or as education funding, not as a quick liquidation opportunity." James looked stunned. "Mom, I don't understand. We always assumed the house would be part of the estate division." "The value of the house is accounted for in the overall distribution," I assured him. "You and Michael will still receive equal financial benefit. This is about how the assets are used, not their ultimate destination." Michael, I noticed, was watching the exchange with quiet interest, while Olivia's eyes had widened at the mention of her name. "As for the commercial properties," I continued, "I've decided to donate the Maple Street building to the Community Arts Center with a perpetual exhibit space named for your father. The remaining properties will be managed in trust, with the income divided equally between you both for 10 years, after which you can decide whether to sell or continue the arrangement." Tori stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're giving away family assets to strangers before your own children?" "Tori," James cautioned, clearly embarrassed. "No, James. Your mother is effectively disinheriting you from property that should rightfully pass to you. And for what? Some temporary shelter that will just drain value from the estate? I met her gaze steadily. Is that how you see my home, Tori? As an asset to be liquidated as quickly as possible after I'm gone? That's not… I didn't mean… She stammered, suddenly aware of how her outburst revealed her priorities. I think you've made your perspective quite clear, I said quietly. Not just today, but throughout my recovery. Your concern has never been my comfort or independence, but rather how quickly and efficiently my assets could be transferred to your control. The room fell silent. James looked at the floor, his discomfort palpable. Michael watched Tori with undisguised disapproval. Olivia seemed confused by the sudden tension. Gran, she finally said, breaking the silence. I don't want your house. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's yours. You should live here as long as you want. I smiled at her genuine concern. Thank you, sweetheart. I plan to. But someday, when I'm gone, I want this home to continue bringing comfort to those who need it before it potentially becomes a home for new generations. Tori collected her purse with trembling hands. James, we're leaving. My son looked torn, glancing between his wife and me. Mom, maybe we should discuss this more when everyone's calmer. There's nothing to discuss, I said gently. These aren't proposals, they're decisions I've already made. Martin has the paperwork ready for my signature next week. This isn't fair, Tori insisted, her voice rising. We've been helping you, caring about your welfare, while Michael swoops in for a few days and then leaves. Yet he gets equal inheritance and more control? Is that why you helped, Tori? For the inheritance? She flushed. Of course not. But family takes care of each other with the understanding that they'll be rewarded financially? I finished for her. James finally found his voice. Mom, that's not what she means. We just always understood that the family properties would pass directly to us someday. And they will. The value of them, at least. Just not in the immediate liquid form Tori seems to prefer. Tori tugged at James's arm. I won't stand here and be insulted. Your mother has clearly made up her mind about me. As they moved toward the door, Olivia hanging back uncertainly, I called out, James, I love you. That hasn't changed. But love doesn't mean I have to enable attitudes about my life and property that I find troubling. He paused, looking back at me with a mixture of hurt and confusion. I don't understand why you're doing this now. Because nearly dying on my bathroom floor gave me clarity, I said simply. About who truly cares for me as a person, not as a collection of assets to be managed and eventually claimed. After they left, with Olivia promising to call me later, Michael helped me clear the untouched dessert. That was quite a dinner. Conversation, he remarked. Too dramatic? I asked. He shook his head. Necessary, I think. Tori's been transparent about her priorities for years. You just finally called her on it. I sank into Richard's chair, suddenly exhausted. I didn't do this to punish them. I truly believe these arrangements better reflect my values. I know that, Mom, and deep down, James probably does too. He's just caught between his wife's expectations and his relationship with you. I nodded, thinking about my son, always. The peacemaker, always trying to please everyone. I hope someday he understands that this was never about loving him less. It's about honoring what your father and I built and ensuring it brings meaning beyond financial gain. Michael squeezed my hand. He will. And if not, that's his journey to work through, not yours to fix. In the weeks that followed, James maintained a strained politeness during his now infrequent visits. Tori stopped coming altogether, sending Olivia alone or with James. My granddaughter, surprisingly, seemed to visit more often, sometimes bringing her friends as promised, other times coming alone to help in the garden or simply talk. Dad's really upset, she confided during one such visit. Not about the money, I don't think, but because he feels like you don't trust him. It's not about trust, I explained. It's about purpose. The wealth your grandfather and I created should do more than just make the next generation comfortable. She nodded thoughtfully. That's what I told Mom, but she doesn't get it. She keeps talking about rightful inheritance and stuff. 3 weeks after revealing my new estate plan, I found myself alone in the house for the first time since the surgery. The silence felt both peaceful and strange after months of caretakers, physical therapists, and family tension. I walked slowly through each room, my hip still tender but healing well, touching familiar objects and reacquainting myself with the home Richard and I had built together. When I reached his study, now returned to its original state after serving, as my temporary bedroom, I sat in his leather chair and opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a small wooden box containing mementos he'd kept throughout our marriage. Movie ticket stubs from our first date, the hospital bracelet from James's birth, a pressed flower from our 40th anniversary. At the bottom lay his final letter, to me, written in the weeks before his unexpected heart attack, as if some part of him had sensed his time was running short. Eleanor, it began, if you're reading this, I'm no longer beside you. But please know that the life we built together was more than I ever dreamed possible. A knock at the front door interrupted my reading. Through the window, I spotted James's car in the driveway. This was unexpected. He hadn't visited unannounced since our family dinner confrontation. I opened the door to find my son looking uncharacteristically disheveled. His tie was loosened, his usually meticulous hair uncombed. "Mom," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." I led him to the living room, noting the dark circles under his eyes. "Would you like some tea?" He shook his head impatiently. "Tori's furious. She's been talking about contesting the estate plan, claiming you were under undue influence or not of sound mind when you made these changes." I sat down slowly, absorbing this information. That would be difficult to prove, given my doctor's assessments and Martin's thorough documentation. "I know," James said, running a hand through his hair. "I've told her that, but he hesitated. She's not thinking rationally about this." "And you?" I asked. "What do you think, James?" He looked away, staring out the window toward the lake. "I don't know what to think anymore. All my life, Dad talked about building something for the family's future. Now it feels like that legacy is being redirected. Your father built a legacy of values, not just assets," I reminded him gently. He would have approved of these changes. James turned back to me, his expression pained. Would he have approved of driving a wedge between us? Because that's what's happening, Mom. Tori barely speaks to me now, blaming me for not stopping. You. She says I've failed to protect our family's interests. The naked anguish in his voice tugged at my heart. I'd anticipated Tori's anger, but not the strain it would place on their marriage. "James," I said carefully, "if your marriage is struggling because of financial expectations about my estate, that suggests deeper issues between you and Tori. It's not just about money," he protested, but his eyes dropped, betraying his uncertainty. "It's about respect. Tori feels dismissed, like her years of attention to you meant nothing." "Attention given with expectation of return isn't genuine care," I pointed out. "It's investment." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "That's unfair. Tori's been part of this family for 17 years. "Yes, and in those 17 years, how often did she visit me before Richard died? How many times did she call just to talk, not to discuss family logistics or holiday plans?" James fell silent, perhaps realizing he couldn't provide examples that would counter my point. "Your father and I never wanted our wealth to become a source of entitlement," I continued. "We worked hard to provide for you boys, but we always hoped you'd find partners who loved you for yourselves, not for your inheritance prospects." That's a terrible thing to imply about my wife, James said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? I asked. James, when was the last time Tori seemed truly happy about something that didn't involve acquisition or status? He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, looking troubled. I'm not trying to hurt you, I said, reaching for his hand. But this situation has forced me to be more direct than I might have been otherwise. He pulled away, standing, abruptly. I should go. James, please, we need to finish this conversation. What's to finish? You've made your decisions. Tori's made hers. And I'm caught in the middle trying to hold everything together. His voice cracked slightly. And what about your decisions? I asked. What do you want, James? Not what Tori wants. Not what you think I want. What do you want? He stared at me, momentarily speechless. I wondered if anyone had asked him that question in years. Perhaps not since he'd married Tori, whose strong personality had always directed their path. He began hesitantly. I want things back the way they were, before Dad died, before all this conflict. We can't go backward, I said gently. But we can find a new way forward, if you're willing. He picked up his keys from the coffee table. I need time to think. As he reached the door, he paused. Olivia wants to come by this weekend. Is that still okay? Of course. She's always welcome. After he left, I returned to Richard's study, to his letter and the memories it contained. Our boys will face their own challenges, he had written. We can't protect them from life's hard lessons, only prepare them to learn from them. How prescient he had been. I only hoped James would find the strength to learn from this situation, rather than simply endure it. The next morning, I received a call from Martin Reynolds. Eleanor, he said, his voice unusually serious. I've just had a rather unpleasant conversation with Victoria Wilson. She's requesting copies of all your estate documents and suggesting she might seek legal counsel regarding your recent changes. I sighed, unsurprised, but still disappointed. She has no standing to make such requests. Of course not, Martin agreed. I informed her that all communications regarding your estate must come directly from you, or in certain circumstances, from James or Michael as your children. She was displeased with this answer. I can imagine. Eleanor, I don't want to overstep, but is James aware of his wife's actions? This type of approach could create significant family strain. I believe the strain is already substantial, I admitted. James visited yesterday, mentioning Tori's anger, but not that she was planning to contact you directly. Martin's voice softened. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, especially during your recovery. Do you want me to speak with James? No, I decided. This is a family matter. James needs to address his wife's behavior directly. After hanging up, I sat on the patio overlooking the garden, contemplating my next move. I had never intended to create such conflict, but perhaps it had been inevitable. Tori's true priorities had remained partially concealed until tested. Now they were exposed for everyone to see, including James. I picked up my phone and called. Michael. Hey, Mom, he answered cheerfully. How's the hip today? Improving, I said. But I'm calling about James and Tori. Things have escalated. I explained the situation, Tori's threat to contest the estate plan, her unauthorized call, to Martin and James's visible distress. Michael listened without interrupting, then said, I'm not surprised, but I am disappointed. What do you need from me? Just your awareness for now. I'm concerned about James. He seems caught between loyalty to Tori and his own sense of what's right. He's always been conflict-averse, Michael observed. Dad used to worry about that, how easily James could be influenced by stronger personalities. Yes, I agreed, remembering Richard's concerns when James first brought Tori home. He had noted her determination, her focus on appearances and status, but had hoped James's gentler nature might balance her materialistic tendencies. "Do you want me to talk to him?" Michael offered. I hesitated. "I'm not sure that would help. He might see it as us ganging up on him." "Probably," Michael agreed. "But the offer stands if you change your mind. And Mom, don't let this situation make you second-guess your decisions. Your estate plan reflects your values. That's exactly what it should do." His support warmed me. "Thank you, Michael." Later that afternoon, I received a text from Olivia. "Gran, is it okay if I come over? Now instead of waiting for the weekend? Need to talk." I immediately replied, "Of course, sweetheart. I'm home all day." 45 minutes later, Olivia arrived, her expression troubled. At 16, she straddled the line between child and adult, her features maturing into a lovely echo of James's, but her emotions still volatile and unfiltered. "Mom and Dad are fighting constantly," she announced without preamble, dropping onto the sofa. "It's about the will thing, isn't it?" I sat beside her, careful with my still healing hip. "Partly, yes, but I suspect there are other issues at play." Olivia pulled at a loose thread on her sleeve. "Mom keeps saying you're being manipulated by Uncle Michael, that you've always favored him. Dad just gets quiet when she starts, which makes her even madder." I reached for her hand. "Your Uncle Michael isn't manipulating me. And I don't favor either of my sons. I love them both dearly, just as I love you." "I know that," she said, looking up. "But Mom's like obsessed with the house now. She drove by here twice yesterday, just staring at it from the street. It's weird." This news disturbed me. "Olivia, has your mother always been so focused on material things?" She shrugged. "I guess. She gets really excited about renovations and designer stuff. Dad jokes that the American Express bill is her favorite monthly reading material." The comment might have been funny under different circumstances. Now it just added another piece to the troubling puzzle of Tori's character. "Gran," Olivia continued, her voice dropping. "Mom told Dad that if he doesn't fix this situation, she's going to talk to a lawyer herself. She said she didn't invest 17 years in this family to walk away with nothing." I felt a chill at her words. "She said that in front of you?" Olivia nodded. "She didn't know I was home. I came back early from practice and heard them in their bedroom." She hesitated. Dad sounded really upset. He said something like, "Do you even hear?" "Yourself. My mother is still alive, and you're talking about her assets like they're already yours to claim." Pride in James surged through me. Perhaps my son was finding his voice at last. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of adult problems," I told Olivia. "This situation is between your parents and me." "But it affects me too," she pointed out reasonably. "And anyway, I'm not a little kid. I understand what's happening. Mom's angry because she thought she was getting the house someday, and now she's not." "It's more complicated than that," I began, but Olivia cut me off. "Not really. Mom's always talking about how this house is wasted on just one person, how the property values in this neighborhood keep going up, how smart it would be to sell it and consolidate assets." She mimicked Tori's precise, slightly condescending tone perfectly. I couldn't help smiling despite the seriousness of the situation. "You're very perceptive." "I just pay attention," she said with another shrug. "Anyway, I wanted you to know that I think what you're doing with the house is cool. Using it to help people before maybe letting me have it someday, that's way better than just selling it for cash." Her support touched me deeply. "Thank you, Olivia. That means a lot to me." We talked for another hour about her school projects, her hopes for college, her memories of Richard. As she prepared to leave, I asked, "Will your mother be upset that you visited me?" Olivia's expression turned defiant. Probably, but I don't care. You're my grandmother, and nobody gets to tell me I can't see you. After she left, I called. James. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice guarded. Mom? James, Olivia just visited me. She's worried about the tension at home. He sighed heavily. I know. I'm sorry she bothered you with this. She didn't bother me. But I am concerned about what she's overhearing. She mentioned Tori's comment about investing 17 years in this family. Silence stretched between us. Finally, James said, I didn't know she heard that. Well, she did. And while I understand Tori's disappointment, her attitude is affecting your daughter. What do you suggest I do? He asked, a hint of frustration entering his voice. Tori is my wife. I can't just... You can insist on respect, I interrupted. If not for me, then for the sanctity of your own family. Olivia shouldn't be hearing her mother talk about me or my assets like items on a balance sheet. You don't understand how difficult this is for me, James said, his voice strained. I'm trying to keep peace between everyone I love. Sometimes peace comes at too high a price, I told him. Your father would tell you the same thing. The mention of Richard seemed to hit him hard. After a long pause, he said quietly, I'll talk to Tori, ask her to be more discreet. It wasn't exactly the firm stance I'd hoped for, but it was something. Thank you, James. And please remember, my door is always open to you and Olivia. Noticeably, he didn't extend the invitation to include Tori. The following day, I met with my physical therapist for my regular session. As we worked through the exercises, she commented on my improved mobility. You're healing remarkably well, Eleanor. Most patients your age take much longer to regain this level of function. I've always been stubborn, I replied, carefully completing the prescribed movement. Richard used to say my determination was both my greatest strength and his greatest challenge. She smiled. Well, it's serving you well now. I think we can reduce your sessions to once a week. This was welcome news. Though the therapy was necessary, it was also exhausting and occasionally painful. Regaining more of my independence felt like reclaiming pieces of myself that the surgery had temporarily taken. As I was gathering my things to leave, the therapist added, By the way, your daughter-in-law called the office yesterday. She was asking about your progress and whether you still needed in-home assistance. I froze. Victoria called you directly? Yes, she confirmed, looking slightly uncomfortable. I explained that I couldn't discuss patient details without your consent. Thank you, I said, making a mental note to call the practice manager about patient confidentiality protocols. Victoria is not authorized to receive information about my care. The therapist nodded, clearly recognizing she had inadvertently stepped into family drama. Of course, I'll make sure that's noted in your file. On the drive home, I pondered this latest development. Tori's call to my physical therapist represented another boundary crossed, another attempt to position herself as having authority over my affairs. Combined with her call to Martin and her comments to James, a pattern was emerging that troubled me deeply. When I arrived home, I found Grace Chen, my neighbor and friend of 30 years, waiting on my porch with a basket of fresh muffins. I saw your car was gone and thought I'd leave these for you, she explained as I approached. But then I decided to wait and say hello properly. It's been too long. We settled in the kitchen with tea and her delicious blueberry muffins. Grace had been a constant presence in my life since she and her husband moved in next door decades ago. She had comforted me after Richard's death and checked on me regularly during my recovery, without ever making me feel like an obligation. How are you really doing? She asked, her dark eyes sharp with concern. And don't give me the polite answer you offer everyone else. I smiled, grateful for her directness. Physically, I'm improving. Emotionally, it's complicated. Family trouble? She guessed. I noticed James hasn't visited as often lately. Briefly, I explained the situation with the estate plan and Tori's reaction. Grace listened attentively, occasionally nodding. "I'm not surprised," she said when I finished. "Victoria has always had her eye on this house. Remember 3 years ago when she brought that real estate friend of hers to the 4th of July barbecue? I overheard them discussing property values and untapped potential in this neighborhood while they were looking at your lake frontage. I hadn't known this. 3 years ago? Richard was still alive then." Grace nodded grimly. "That's what made it so distasteful. They were practically sizing the place up while you and Richard were hosting them." The revelation sent a wave of coldness through me. I had sensed Tori's materialism, her focus on status and acquisition, but I hadn't realized how calculating she had been, how long she had viewed our home as an eventual asset rather than our beloved space. "James is struggling with all this," I told Grace. "I'm worried about him." "James has always been too willing to keep the peace at his own expense," Grace observed. She had watched both my sons grow up, knew their personalities almost as well as I did. Richard used to worry that James would eventually be worn down by Tori's stronger will. "He mentioned those concerns to you?" I asked, surprised. "Many times." Grace's expression softened with memories. Richard admired James's gentle nature, but feared it made him vulnerable to people who would take advantage of his desire to please everyone. This matched my own recollections of conversations with Richard. He had loved both our sons deeply, but had recognized their different strengths and weaknesses with clear-eyed honesty. "I don't want to drive James away," I confessed. "But I can't pretend I don't see what's happening either." Grace reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "The truth may hurt initially, but lies and pretense poison relationships slowly over time. You're doing the right thing, Eleanor." Her validation comforted me. Grace had always been a voice of unvarnished honesty in my life, never afraid to challenge me when needed, but equally quick to offer support when deserved. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "By the way, I saw Victoria driving past your house yesterday very slowly. Just thought you should know." This confirmed what Olivia had mentioned. Twice, according to Olivia. Grace raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I saw her 3 times. Morning, afternoon, and early evening." After Grace left, I called the security company that had installed our system years ago. The technician arrived the next morning and updated everything, adding new cameras, covering all approaches to the house, implementing better motion sensors, and setting up a direct alert to my phone for any unusual activity. "This is a significant upgrade, Mrs. Wilson," he explained as he demonstrated the new features. "May I ask if you've had security concerns recently?" "Just being cautious," I replied, not wanting to share my private family matters. "At my age, living alone, it seems prudent." He nodded, accepting my explanation without further questions. Once he had completed the installation and left, I sat in the living room, contemplating what it had come to: security cameras to monitor my daughter-in-law's movements around my property. The situation felt surreal, like something from one of those sensational movies Olivia occasionally convinced me to watch. Just as I was considering calling James to discuss Tori's strange behavior, my phone rang. The screen displayed Martin Reynolds. "Eleanor," he began without preamble, "I've received a formal letter from an attorney representing Victoria Wilson, requesting copies of your estate documents and suggesting you may not have been of sound mind when making recent changes." Despite having anticipated this possibility, the reality of it struck me like a physical blow. She actually found a lawyer willing to pursue this? "A relatively inexperienced one from a small firm," Martin said dismissively. "Nothing for you to worry about legally. I've already drafted a response explaining the extensive documentation we have regarding your mental competence and the deliberate extended process of your estate planning changes." "And James? Is he aware of this?" Martin hesitated. Letter doesn't mention him as a party to the inquiry, which suggests he may not be involved. However, I would be surprised if he were completely unaware. What happens next? I asked, my mind racing. Legally, very little. Her attorney will receive our response, which effectively closes the matter unless they want to file an actual claim, which would be premature since these are changes to a living person's will, not a contested inheritance. But personally, Eleanor, this represents a significant escalation in family tensions. Yes, I agreed, my voice tight. It certainly does. After finishing with Martin, I sat motionless for several minutes, absorbing the implications of Tori's latest action. She had moved beyond complaints and threats to actual legal measures, without James's name attached, but certainly with his knowledge, unless their communication had completely broken down. With trembling fingers, I dialed James's number. It went straight to voicemail. I left a brief message. James, we need to talk. Please call me as soon as possible. Next, I called Michael, who answered immediately. When I explained the situation, he swore softly. This is outrageous. Tori has completely overstepped. Do you want me to fly out? Not yet, I decided. Let me talk to James first. But I may need your support soon if this continues to escalate. I can be on a plane tonight if needed, he assured me. I spent the rest of the day in a strange limbo, alternating between anger at Tori's audacity and concern for James. By evening, he still hadn't returned my call. I considered driving to their house but decided against a confrontation that might push him further away. Instead, I texted Olivia. Everything okay at home? Haven't heard from your dad today. Her response came quickly. Dad's not here. He and Mom had a huge fight last night. He packed a bag and left. My heart sank. I called her immediately. Gran, she answered, her voice thick with tears. It's really bad this time. Where's your father now? I asked. I don't know. He wouldn't tell me, said he didn't want to put me in the middle, but he promised he'd call me tomorrow. And your mother? Olivia's voice dropped to a whisper. She's been on the phone all day. I heard her talking to some lawyer saying Dad was undermining her efforts to secure our family's future. Then she was crying to her sister about how Dad chose his mother over his own wife. So messed up. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Olivia, would you like to come stay with me for a few days? Just until things settle down? Mom would never allow it, she said bitterly. She's already told me I'm not allowed to visit you until this situation is resolved. The restriction infuriated me. She cannot prevent you from seeing your grandmother. I know. But I don't want to make things worse right now. Olivia's voice cracked slightly. Gran, do you think they're going to get divorced? The question hung between us, heavy with implications. I don't know, sweetheart, but whatever happens between your parents, it doesn't change how much they both love you. And it certainly doesn't change how much I love you. I know, she said, sounding momentarily younger than her 16 years. I just wish everything could go back to normal. After we hung up, I tried James's number again. This time, someone answered, but there was only silence on the line. James? I said. Is that you? A heavy sigh, then finally his voice. Yes, Mom. It's me. Where are you? Olivia says you left the house. I'm at the Lakeside Inn, he said, sounding exhausted. I needed some space to think. James, Martin, called me today. Did you know Tori hired an attorney to challenge my estate plan? Another long silence. She told me she was exploring options. I didn't know she had actually done it. And if you had known, I pressed. I would have tried to stop her, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Mom, everything's falling apart. Tori's convinced you're trying to cut her out of her rightful inheritance, that you've never respected her place in the family. This Isn't about respect, James. It's about boundaries. Tori is acting as if she has some claim on my assets while I'm still very much alive. That's not normal or acceptable behavior. I know, he admitted quietly. At least, I'm starting to see that now. Hope flickered at his words. James, come to the house. Let's talk in person. He hesitated. I can't tonight. I need time to process everything. But tomorrow I'll come by. After we hung up, I paced the living room, too agitated to sit still despite my hips' lingering discomfort. The situation had spiraled beyond anything I had anticipated when I made those initial changes to my estate plan. What had begun as a desire to better align my legacy with my values had erupted into a family crisis that threatened my son's marriage and my relationship with my granddaughter. For a moment, I questioned whether I had done the right thing. Would it have been better to leave things as they were, to allow Tori her assumptions about eventually controlling my assets? Would that have preserved family peace? But as quickly as the doubt came, it dissipated. No, giving in to Tori's materialistic expectations would only have reinforced her belief that relationships were transactional, that family connections could be valued in dollars and cents. That was not the legacy I wanted to leave, not the lesson I wanted Olivia to learn. I walked to the window overlooking the lake, where evening light cast long shadows across the water. This house had witnessed so many moments of our family history: birthdays, holidays, quiet Sunday afternoons with Richard reading in his chair while I worked on charity committee reports. It was more than wood and glass and prime real estate. It was a repository of memories, a physical manifestation of the life we had built. And now it had become a battleground, exposing the fault lines in our family that had perhaps been there all along, hidden beneath the surface of polite family gatherings and carefully maintained appearances. Tomorrow, James would come, and we would talk, really talk, about what mattered, about the values that should guide our decisions, about the future of our family beyond material possessions and inheritance expectations. I hoped he was finally ready to see the truth, not just about Tori, but about himself and what he truly wanted from life. As I turned away from the window, my phone chimed with a text from Michael. Booked a flight for tomorrow morning. We'll be there by afternoon. This family stands together. Despite everything, I smiled. Whatever tomorrow brought, I wouldn't face it alone. The night passed fitfully, sleep evading me as my mind churned with thoughts of the coming confrontation. By morning, I had settled on an approach, not accusation or defense, but honest, open conversation about values and expectations. James needed clarity, not judgment. I spent the early hours preparing, making his favorite blueberry scones, setting out photo albums from his childhood, gathering documents that might help him understand the reasoning behind my estate decisions. If we were to repair this rift, we needed to reconnect with what truly mattered in our family history. Just as I finished arranging everything, my phone rang. The screen displayed Olivia Mobile. Gran? Her voice sounded strange, higher than usual, threaded with panic. Something's happening at the house. Mom's throwing Dad's things into suitcases, screaming about betrayal. I think she found out he's meeting you today. My grip tightened on the phone. Is your father there? No, but he's on his way. He called to say he'd be picking up some clothes. Gran, I'm scared. I've never seen Mom like this. Where are you right now? I asked, already moving toward the door, grabbing my purse and keys. In my bedroom. Mom's downstairs. Stay there. Lock your door if you can. I'm coming over. No! Olivia's voice rose sharply. If Mom sees you, it'll just make everything worse. She was probably right, but the thought of my granddaughter alone and frightened was unbearable. Olivia, is there somewhere safe you can go? A friend's house, perhaps? Maybe Emma's? She lives 2 streets over. Call her right now. Ask if you can come over. If yes, Wait until your mother is occupied, then go quickly. Text me when you're safe. Okay, she agreed, her voice steadier. Gran, please be careful when Dad gets there. Mom's saying really terrible things. After we hung up, I called James. When he didn't answer, I left an urgent voicemail. James, Olivia just called me. Tori is extremely upset about our meeting. Please be careful when you go to the house and call me immediately. Next, I called Michael, who had texted earlier that his flight was boarding. It went to voicemail, likely because he was already in the air. I left a brief message explaining the situation. 20 minutes passed with no word from anyone. I was considering driving to James's house despite Olivia's warning when my phone finally chimed with a text. At Emma's, Dad showed up while I was leaving. Mom started screaming as soon as she saw him. I couldn't stay. Relief flooded me knowing Olivia was safe, but concern for James intensified. I texted back, "Thank you for letting me know. Stay at Emma's until you hear from me or your father." Another 30 minutes crawled by with no communication from James. I tried calling again, straight to voicemail. The uncertainty was unbearable. Finally, unable to wait any longer, I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Just as I reached it, headlights swept across the front windows. A car was pulling into my driveway, moving too fast, braking suddenly. Through the window, I recognized James's sedan. He emerged from the driver's side, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. Even from a distance, I could see something was wrong. When he stepped into the porch light, I gasped. His left eye was swollen, a darkening bruise spreading across his cheekbone. His normally immaculate shirt was torn at the collar. I flung open the door. "James! What happened?" He stumbled inside, collapsing onto the nearest chair. "Tori," he said, his voice hollow. She saw the texts on my phone, our conversation about meeting today. She was waiting when I arrived. I stared at my son's bruised face, momentarily paralyzed by shock. In 43 years of motherhood, I had never seen James injured like this. Not from childhood roughhousing, not from college sports, certainly not from domestic violence. "Let me get some ice," I managed, guiding him toward the kitchen. He followed mutely, his movements stiff and mechanical. Under the bright kitchen lights, the damage looked even worse. His left eye was swelling shut, the skin around it mottled, purple and red. A thin line of dried blood traced from his split lip down his chin. "James," I said carefully, wrapping ice in a clean dish towel. "Did Tori do this to you?" He nodded once, wincing as he pressed the makeshift ice pack to his face. "She was waiting when I got home, started screaming as soon as I walked in, saying, 'I was plotting against her with you and Michael.'" "Plotting?" I echoed, the accusation so absurd I almost laughed despite the gravity of the situation. "She found our text messages about meeting today. Then she went through my email and found that I'd been in touch with Martin." He closed his good eye briefly. "I told Martin yesterday that I wouldn't support any legal action against you." Pride and sorrow tangled in my chest. "And that's when she—" I gestured to his injuries. "Not exactly." He set the ice pack down, revealing the darkening bruise beneath. "First she threw my laptop, then some framed photos. She was screaming that I'd betrayed her, chosen you over her, ruined all her plans." His voice faltered. When I tried to calm her down, to explain that this wasn't about taking sides, she just lost it. "James, this is assault. We need to call the police." "No." His response was immediate, almost panicked. "No police. It would destroy Olivia to see her mother arrested." "Olivia is already traumatized," I pointed out. "She called me, terrified by what was happening. She's at her friend Emma's house now." Relief flickered across his battered face. "Good. That's good." I told her to leave when I saw how out of control Tori was getting. I sat across from him, trying to process what was happening. My pragmatic, image-conscious daughter-in-law had always seemed coldly calculating, not violently impulsive. Has Tori ever been physical with you before? No. James looked down at his hands. She's thrown things during arguments, slammed doors, but never this. And Olivia? Has Tori ever— No, he interrupted firmly. Never. Tori's been controlling with Olivia, critical sometimes, but never violent. I nodded, slightly relieved. What happened after she attacked you? James touched his swollen eye gingerly. I left, just grabbed my keys and walked out. She was still screaming, throwing things at the door as I drove away. He looked up at me, his expression lost. Mom, everything's fallen apart. My marriage, my home. You can stay here as long as you need, I assured him, reaching for his hand. The guest room is always ready. His fingers tightened around mine. I should have seen this coming. There were signs. Her obsession with status, with acquiring things, her fixation on your house and what she called our rightful inheritance. He shook his head slowly. I just never wanted to admit what it meant. Which was what? I asked. Gently. That she married me for financial security more than love. That she saw our family connections as assets to be leveraged. His voice broke. That I was a means to an end. The raw pain in his admission squeezed my heart. James, I'm so sorry. Don't be, he said, straightening slightly. I'm the one who should apologize. I should have stood up to her years ago, set boundaries, protected you from her manipulations. Instead, I tried to keep everyone happy, to be the peacemaker, and ended up enabling her worst tendencies. His self-awareness surprised me. The James of even a few weeks ago would have made excuses, sought compromise, avoided difficult truths. This James, despite his physical wounds, seemed stronger somehow, more certain. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, he admitted. I need to talk to Olivia, make sure she's okay, and then— He gestured vaguely. Figure out what's next. Just then, my phone rang. The screen displayed Martin Reynolds. Eleanor, Martin began without preamble. I've just received a very disturbing call from Victoria Wilson. She's threatening to go public with claims that you've manipulated James into turning against her, that you're trying to disinherit her and Olivia due to personal animosity. I glanced at James, whose expression had hardened at the mention of his wife's name. Martin, James is actually here with me now. I'm going to put you on speaker. After I explained the situation, including James's injuries, Martin's voice turned grave. James, with all due respect, this is now beyond a private family matter. Domestic violence changes the equation entirely. I'm not pressing charges, James insisted. That's your decision, Martin acknowledged. But you should still document your injuries for any potential legal proceedings, including divorce. And, Eleanor, given Victoria's escalating behavior, I strongly advise additional security measures. Already implemented, I assured him. Good. Now, regarding Victoria's legal threats, they have no merit whatsoever. Her lawyer's letter was already on shaky ground. Any public accusations would almost certainly constitute defamation. Martin paused. However, we should prepare for her to escalate further. People who resort to violence when losing control rarely de-escalate without intervention. After we ended the call, I turned to James. You need medical attention for that eye. He started to protest, but I held up a hand. Not negotiable. You need documentation of these injuries, even if you never use it. And you need to make sure there's no serious damage. Reluctantly, he agreed. I drove him to the emergency room, where the staff took one look at his face and expedited his care. The doctor, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, examined him, thoroughly, ordered scans to rule out orbital fractures, and cleaned his split lip. "How did this happen?" she asked directly, looking between us. James hesitated. "It was a domestic dispute." The doctor's expression softened slightly. "I see. These injuries are consistent with blunt force trauma, possibly from a thrown object followed by direct strikes. We're legally required to report suspected domestic violence." "I understand," James said quietly. "But I'm not ready to file a police report." She nodded, respecting his decision while clearly documenting everything in his medical record. "The good news is there's no fracture, just significant soft tissue damage. The bad news is you're going to look worse before you look better." After receiving care instructions and prescriptions for pain management, we left the hospital. It was past midnight now, both of us exhausted from the day's events. "Let me text Olivia," James said as we drove home. "I don't want her to worry all night." He composed a brief message, explaining that he was staying with me and would see her tomorrow. Her response came seconds later. "Are you okay? Mom's been calling Emma's parents nonstop." James showed me the text with a grimace. Tori must have figured out where Olivia went. "Emma's parents won't send her home if she doesn't feel safe, will they?" I asked, concerned. "No, the Kims are solid people. They'll keep her there, if needed." When we arrived back at my house, James's energy seemed to evaporate. The medication, the emotional toll, the late hour, all combined to leave him swaying slightly as he walked inside. "Straight to bed," I instructed, guiding him toward the guest room. "Everything else can wait until morning." For a moment he looked like the little boy who used to crawl into my lap after scraping his knee, seeking comfort and reassurance. "Mom?" he said hesitantly. "Thank you for everything." I kissed his uninjured cheek gently. "Get some rest. We'll figure it all out tomorrow." After James was settled, I checked that all doors were locked, security cameras active. Then, despite the late hour, I called Michael, whose flight would have landed in Boston by now. "Mom?" He answered immediately, voice alert despite the time. "I just checked into my hotel. What's happening?" I filled him in on the evening's events. Tori's violent outburst, James's injuries, Olivia taking refuge with her friend. "Jesus," Michael exhaled sharply. "I knew Tori was materialistic, but this is something else entirely. Do you feel safe? With James there? Should I come over tonight?" "We're fine for now," I assured him. "James is already asleep in the guest room, but I'd like you to come first thing tomorrow. We need to develop a plan." "I'll be there by 8, he promised. "And Mom? You were right about Tori all along. I just wish we'd all seen it sooner." After we hung up, I sat in Richard's chair in the darkened living room, trying to process everything that had happened. Violence had erupted in our family. Violence triggered by greed, by thwarted expectations, by the exposure of Tori's true priorities. James was injured, Olivia displaced, and the careful structure of our family relationships had been fundamentally altered. And yet, beneath my concern and sorrow, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity. The estate plan changes that had catalyzed this crisis had also forced a necessary reckoning. The truth about Tori, about her values, her motivations, her character, was now undeniable, even to James, who had spent years making excuses for her behavior. Sometimes healing requires lancing the wound first, I reflected, Richard's voice almost palpable in my memory. He had always believed in facing hard truths directly, in addressing problems at their root, rather than merely treating symptoms. I finally went to bed around 2 a.m., setting my alarm for early morning. Despite everything, I slept deeply, the sleep of someone who has passed through a storm and glimpsed calmer waters ahead. Michael arrived promptly at 8, as promised. I had already been up for an hour, preparing coffee and a simple breakfast. James was still asleep, his body desperately needing recovery time. My younger son embraced me tightly, then held me at arm's length, examining my face as if to ensure I was truly all right. "You look exhausted," he observed. "It's been an eventful 24 hours," I acknowledged. "But I'm fine. It's James I'm worried about." We sat in the kitchen, keeping our voices low to avoid waking him. I showed Michael the photos I'd taken of James's injuries at the hospital. Documentation, as Martin had suggested. Michael's expression darkened as he swiped through the images. "This is beyond disturbing. Has he decided what he wants to do? Legally, I mean?" "Not yet. His primary concern is Olivia." "Understandable," Michael nodded. "But he needs to protect himself too. Tori's clearly unstable." Just then, James appeared in the doorway, his injured eye now swollen completely shut, the bruising having spread overnight. Despite this, he seemed steadier than the previous evening. "Morning," he said, accepting the coffee I offered. "Michael, thanks for coming." Michael stood, embracing his brother carefully. "Jesus. James, your face looks worse than it feels," James claimed, though the way he winced as he sat suggested otherwise. Over breakfast, we discussed next steps. James had already texted with Olivia, who reported that Tori had finally stopped calling the Kims' house around 3 a.m. She would stay there until we developed a plan. "I need to file for emergency custody," James said, his decision apparently made overnight. "And a restraining order against Tori." Michael and I exchanged surprised glances. "Are you sure?" I asked gently. "Yesterday you didn't even want to call the police." "I've been thinking about it all night," James explained. "What if Olivia had been home when Tori lost control? What if she tries to force Olivia to come home?" "I can't take that risk." He set his coffee down firmly. "I'm not pressing assault charges yet. That would devastate Olivia. But I need legal protection for both of us." "I can call Jessica Chen," Michael offered. "Grace's daughter, the family. Law attorney. She's excellent, and she can probably see you today given the circumstances." James nodded gratefully. "That would be helpful, and I'll need a place for Olivia and me to stay. A hotel maybe, or—" "You'll stay here," I interrupted. "Both of you, as long as needed. There's plenty of room." "Mom, are you sure? After everything that's happened, having us here might put you in Tori's crosshairs even more directly." I smiled, touched by his concern despite his own crisis. "I'm quite capable of handling Tori. Besides, the security system is excellent, and it makes more sense for family to stay together right now." While Michael arranged the meeting with Jessica Chen, James called Olivia to update her on our plans. From his half of the conversation, I could tell she was relieved to have clear direction amidst the chaos. "The Kims will drop you here after school," he told her. "Pack whatever you need from their house. We'll figure out retrieving your things from home later." After he hung up, he looked thoughtful. "She said Tori's been texting her nonstop, alternating between apologies and accusations, blaming me for destroying our family, blaming you for manipulating everyone." "Classic Darvo," Michael observed. "Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Textbook behavior from abusers." James flinched slightly at the term abuser being applied to his wife, but didn't contradict it. "I still can't believe it came to this. 17 years of marriage, and it unravels completely in less than a month." "It didn't unravel in a month," I pointed out gently. "The threads were weakening for years. My estate plan changes just revealed what was already there." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I just didn't want to see it." The meeting with Jessica Chen was scheduled for 11 a.m. While James showered and prepared, Michael and I sat on the patio, discussing the larger situation. "Have you thought about how this might affect your estate plans?" he asked carefully. "You mean, will I change them again to exclude Tori completely?" I clarified. "Essentially, yes. I considered this. The plans already limited her influence significantly, but given recent events, I should probably review everything with Martin again. Ensure Olivia's interests are fully protected regardless of what happens between James and Tori. Michael nodded. Good idea. And what about your personal safety? Tori's behavior is escalating unpredictably. The security system is robust, I assured him. And frankly, I don't think Tori would risk direct confrontation with me. Her approach has always been more indirect, manipulation, attempts to influence through others. Until yesterday, when she physically attacked James, Michael pointed out. People don't usually start with that level of violence, they escalate to it. He had a valid point. I'll be careful, I promised. No unnecessary risks. James emerged looking marginally better, his hair damp from the shower, wearing clothes Michael had brought for him. The bruising remained shocking, but his demeanor was calmer, more resolved. Ready? Michael asked, standing. James nodded. As I'll ever be. Before they left, he turned to me. Mom, if Tori comes here, don't engage with her. Call the police immediately. I will, I promised, touched by his concern even amidst his own crisis. After they departed, I called Martin Reynolds to update him on the situation and schedule. A meeting to review my estate plans in light of recent developments. Then I began preparing Olivia's room, making sure the space felt welcoming for my granddaughter during this difficult transition. Around 1 p.m., my phone rang. The screen displayed unknown number, which I normally wouldn't answer, but given the circumstances, I accepted the call. Eleanor. Tori's voice, surprisingly steady. We need to talk. My pulse quickened, but I kept my tone neutral. I don't think that's a good idea, Victoria. Not after what happened last night. James has always been dramatic, she dismissed. I barely touched him. He provoked me deliberately, betraying me after everything I've done for this family. The casual denial of violence I had witnessed with my own eyes confirmed everything about her character. Victoria, James is pursuing legal protection for himself and Olivia. I suggest you consult your attorney. Is that a threat? Her voice sharpened. Because I have evidence too, Eleanor. Evidence of your manipulation, your attempts to turn my husband and daughter against me. You've hated me from the beginning, resented my influence in your precious son's life. That's simply not true, I replied calmly. But this conversation isn't productive. Please don't call again. This isn't over, she hissed. That house should have been ours. Everything you have should rightfully pass to your son, to us. You've cheated us, and I won't stand for it. The naked greed in her voice was almost shocking in its baldness. No pretense remained, no facade, of family concern or affection. Goodbye, Victoria, I said firmly, ending the call. Immediately, I texted James. Tori just called me. She's angry and making threats. Be careful. His response came quickly. At attorney's office now, getting restraining order today. We'll call when done. I forwarded the same information to Michael, then sat heavily in the nearest chair, the confrontation having drained me more than I expected. Richard would have handled this differently, I thought suddenly. He had always been more direct in confronting problems, less concerned with maintaining peace at the expense of honesty. Perhaps if he had been here, we might have addressed Tori's problematic behavior years ago, before it escalated to this point. But regret served no purpose now. We could only move forward, protecting what mattered. James's safety, Olivia's well-being, our family's core values. Around 3 p.m., I heard a car in the driveway. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I saw James and Michael returning. James carried a folder of documents, presumably the emergency orders from court. We got everything, he announced as they entered. Temporary restraining order against Tori for both Olivia and me, emergency custody order, and authorization to retrieve essential belongings from the house with police escort. That's excellent, I said, relieved that the legal system had responded appropriately to his need for protection. Jessica was amazing, Michael added. She expedited everything, had the right connections to get us before a judge today. James sank into a chair, the strain of the day evident in his posture. Now we just need to get Olivia and figure out next steps. One day at a time, I reminded him, a phrase Richard had often used during difficult periods. Today, we focus on safety and immediate needs. Tomorrow we can consider longer-term plans. He nodded gratefully. You're right. I just keep thinking about how to explain all this to Olivia. How to help her understand that her mother's behavior isn't normal or acceptable without destroying her relationship with Tori completely. Olivia is remarkably perceptive, I pointed out. She's already seen and understood more than you might think. True, James acknowledged. She's been hinting for years that Tori's materialistic focus bothered her. I just didn't listen closely enough. Michael checked his watch. School's out soon. Should we go pick up Olivia instead of waiting for the Kims to bring her? James considered this. Maybe that's better. I should explain everything to her directly, away from here, in case she has questions or concerns. They left together to collect Olivia, leaving me to prepare dinner and ensure everything was ready for her arrival. I chose to make her favorite meal, homemade macaroni and cheese with the crispy breadcrumb topping she loved, comfort food for a difficult day. As I worked in the kitchen, I thought about how quickly life could change. Just months ago, my primary concern had been recovering. From hip surgery, now I was preparing to house my son and granddaughter indefinitely while they navigated the aftermath of domestic violence and the likely dissolution of a 17-year marriage. Yet despite the painful circumstances, I felt a curious sense of rightness. We were facing hard truths together, supporting each other through crisis, exemplifying the family values Richard and I had always tried to instill: honesty, courage, unconditional support. The sound of multiple car doors signaled their return. Through the window, I watched James embrace Olivia tightly before they walked toward the house, Michael following with her bags. My granddaughter's face was tear-streaked but composed, her shoulders straight despite the evident emotional weight she carried. "Gran," she said simply when she entered, walking directly into my outstretched arms. I held her close, this child who suddenly seemed so grown up. "I'm so sorry about all of this, sweetheart." "Not your fault," she mumbled against my shoulder. Dad explained everything, about Mom's behavior, about the restraining order. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. I always knew Mom was obsessed with money and status, but I never thought she'd actually hurt Dad. The maturity in her assessment broke my heart and made me proud simultaneously. "How are you feeling about staying here for a while?" "Grateful," she said immediately. I couldn't go back home knowing what happened there, and I definitely couldn't stay with Mom right now. Her expression darkened. "She's been texting me all day, saying Dad's lying about his injuries, that you've manipulated everyone against her." James stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't need to engage with those messages, Liv. In fact, it might be best to block her number temporarily, just until things settle." Olivia nodded reluctantly. I already muted her notifications. It was too much. She sniffed the air, her expression brightening slightly. "Is that your mac and cheese, Gran?" "With extra crispy topping," I confirmed, relieved to see a small smile cross her face. "Can I help?" she asked. "I need to do something normal right now." "Of course. You can finish the salad while I check on the casserole." Working together in the kitchen provided a welcome sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. James sat at the counter watching us, his expression a complex mixture of sorrow, relief, and something like hope. Michael busied himself setting the table and fielding work, calls that couldn't wait despite the family crisis. Dinner was subdued but not somber. We avoided dwelling on the immediate trauma, focusing instead on practical matters. Olivia's school schedule, arrangements for retrieving more of their belongings, how to allocate space in the house for an extended stay. I can coordinate with your teachers about any assignments you might miss, I offered, remembering my connections at the high school from my years on the Education Foundation board. And I'll make sure your college application process stays on track, Michael added. This situation shouldn't derail your future plans. Olivia looked between us, her expression softening. Thank you, all of you. I was so scared last night, seeing Mom that way, not knowing where Dad had gone. Her voice wavered. But now I feel like maybe things will be okay, eventually. They will be, James assured her, reaching for her hand across the table. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but we'll get through this together. After dinner, Olivia retreated to her room to organize her belongings and complete homework. James took pain medication and lay down, the day's stresses having exacerbated his injuries. Michael and I sat in the living room, speaking quietly. You should stay a few more days, I suggested, until we're sure things have stabilized. He nodded. Already planned on it. I've cleared my calendar through next week, working remotely as needed. What do you think happens next? I asked, not really expecting an answer but needing to voice the question. Michael considered this. Legally? James moves forward with divorce proceedings, custody arrangements, property division. Emotionally? He shrugged. That's harder to predict. He's in shock right now, operating on instinct and adrenaline. The full impact hasn't hit him yet. And Olivia? She's remarkably resilient, Michael observed, but she'll need support. Processing everything. Professional support, probably, beyond what we can provide. I nodded agreement. I'll look into family therapists tomorrow. We sat in companionable silence for a while, the weight of the day settling around us. Finally, Michael spoke again, his voice soft with reflection. You know, when you first told me about changing your estate plans, I thought it was a good idea, but maybe unnecessary. I didn't fully grasp how deeply Tori's materialism ran, how entitled she felt to your assets. He shook his head. I should have paid closer attention all these years. We all missed signs, I acknowledged. Even me. I saw her fixation on status, on acquisition, but I never imagined it would lead to violence. The estate plan was the catalyst, but not the cause, Michael said thoughtfully. It just revealed what was already there. His words echoed my earlier thoughts so precisely that I smiled despite everything. That's exactly right. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I walked through the quiet house, checking locks, adjusting thermostats, the familiar routine of securing our home for the night. In James's childhood bedroom, now the guest room, I paused at the door, listening to his deep, medication-assisted breathing. In Olivia's room, formerly Michael's, I heard the soft tapping of computer keys, homework, or perhaps journaling about the day's events. This was not how I had envisioned my 70s unfolding. After Richard's death, I had pictured a quiet life of volunteer work, occasional travel, peaceful family gatherings. Instead, I found myself at the center of family upheaval, providing refuge for my injured son and displaced granddaughter. Yet as I returned to my bedroom, I realized I wouldn't have had it any other way. This was what family meant, being present in crisis, offering safety when storms struck, standing firm for values that mattered. Richard would have been proud of how we were handling this situation, particularly of James's courage in finally confronting the truth about his marriage. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, practical arrangements for James and Olivia's extended stay, potential confrontations with Tori or her attorney, adjustments to my estate plans to reflect our new reality. But tonight, everyone in my care was safe, and that was enough. I fell asleep thinking of Richard's favorite quote, one he had often repeated during difficult times. The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. We had certainly experienced the miserable part. Perhaps freedom would follow. The next morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the windows as if nature itself were offering a fresh perspective. I woke early, habit after decades of rising with the sun, and found James already in the kitchen, coffee brewed, his injured face looking marginally better in the morning light. "Couldn't sleep past 5, he explained, pouring me a cup. "Too many thoughts." I accepted the coffee gratefully. "Understandable. How's the pain?" "Manageable." He touched his bruised eye gingerly. "The doctor said the swelling should start to decrease today." We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching the garden come alive with morning light. Finally, James spoke again. "I've been thinking about what happens next. Legally, practically, everything." "And?" I prompted gently. "I need to file for divorce." He stated it simply, a conclusion reached after long consideration. Not just because of what happened 2 nights ago, but because of everything it revealed about our marriage, about who Tori really is. I nodded, not surprised by his decision, but impressed by the clarity with which he expressed it. "Have you thought about what that means practically? Your house, finances, Olivia's arrangements?" "Some," he admitted. Jessica suggested I document everything related to Tori's behavior. Her calls to Martin, her attempts to access your medical information, her obsession with your estate, culminating in the violence. She thinks it will be relevant for both divorce and custody proceedings. "That seems wise," I agreed. "And your financial entanglement with her?" James grimaced. "That's more complicated. Our assets are significantly merged. The house, investment accounts, even my position at the firm has connections to her family through clients she brought in." He sighed heavily. "Untangling everything will be messy and potentially costly." "Whatever you need, I'm here to help," I assured him. "Financial assistance, legal support, whatever it takes." His expression softened with gratitude. "Thank you. I may need to take you up on that, at least temporarily. The restraining order prevents me from accessing our joint accounts right now, which was necessary for protection, but leaves me in an awkward position financially." We were interrupted by Olivia's arrival, sleep-rumpled but alert. "Morning?" she mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. "Since when do you drink coffee?" James asked, momentarily distracted from our serious conversation. "Since my life turned into a soap opera," she replied dryly, adding liberal amounts of milk and sugar to her cup. Her attempt at humor barely masked the strain evident in her voice. "How did you sleep?" I asked, wanting to normalize the morning despite our circumstances. "Okay, I guess. Weird dreams?" She slid into a chair beside her father, examining his face with clinical interest. "The bruising pattern is changing color already. That's good. Means it's healing." James managed a small smile. "Thanks for the medical assessment, Dr. Wilson." "Don't mock," she responded. "I've been researching. It helps me feel less." She trailed off, unable to articulate the complex emotions she was processing. "Less helpless?" I suggested gently. She nodded, staring into her coffee. "Yeah, that." The 3 of us sat together as the morning brightened around us, a new family configuration forming in the wake of crisis. Different, unplanned, but somehow right in its own way. Michael joined us shortly after, and we discussed the day's logistics. James would meet with his divorce attorney again to begin formal proceedings. Michael would accompany Olivia to retrieve more belongings from the house. Police escort arranged for noon. I would stay home, coordinating with Martin about estate plan adjustments and researching family therapists in the area. As they prepared to leave for their respective tasks, I felt a surge of pride in how everyone was handling this difficult situation, with courage, clarity, and mutual support. We were navigating uncharted waters, but we were doing it together, guided by the values Richard and I had always tried to instill. The road ahead would be challenging. Tori would likely escalate her efforts before accepting the new reality. The legal proceedings would be stressful and potentially prolonged. Emotional healing would take time for everyone, especially Olivia. But watching my family move with purpose despite their pain, I felt an unexpected sense of hope. Sometimes, the greatest growth emerges from the deepest wounds. Sometimes families become stronger at the broken places. And sometimes, I reflected as I began my own tasks for the day. The most valuable inheritance we leave isn't measured in assets or possessions, but in the values that guide our decisions when crisis strikes. Richard would have understood this perfectly. 6 months had passed since that terrible night when James arrived at my doorstep with a bruised face and shattered illusions. The seasons had changed, turning the lakeside trees from winter bareness to spring green to the rich gold of early autumn. Our lives, too, had transformed in ways both painful and necessary. The court hearing to strengthen the restraining order had gone in our favor, with the judge not only granting the expanded protections, but also expressing concern about Tori's escalating behavior. Her allegations about my supposed manipulation and elder financial abuse were dismissed outright, particularly after Martin presented the extensive documentation of my estate planning process. Tori had not taken these legal defeats gracefully. For weeks, she had continued her campaign of misinformation among our social circle, alternating between portraying herself as the victim of a controlling mother-in-law and claiming James had fabricated abuse to gain advantage in divorce proceedings. Most people who knew our family recognized these claims for what they were, but a few, particularly those who had only known the carefully curated public version of Tori, accepted her narrative. "It doesn't matter what they believe," James had said when I expressed concern about these social ripples. "The truth is documented. The people who matter know what really happened." His newfound clarity had been one of the unexpected gifts of this difficult period. The James who had always sought to please everyone, who had compromised his own needs to keep peace, had been replaced by a man who understood his own worth and stood firmly for his values. The divorce was not yet final. Tori's delaying tactics had dragged the process out, but the major issues had been resolved through mediation. James had received full custody of Olivia, with Tori granted supervised visitation twice monthly. The family home would be sold, with proceeds divided according to a formula that acknowledged James's greater financial contribution to the marriage. Most importantly, strong provisions were in place to ensure Tori could never access any inheritance James or Olivia might eventually receive from my estate. On this crisp October morning, I sat on the patio with my second cup of coffee, watching golden leaves drift onto the lawn. The tranquility of the moment felt earned after months of legal battles and emotional upheaval. "Morning, Gran." Olivia appeared beside me, wrapped in a thick sweater despite the mild temperature. At 17, she seemed older than her years, her experiences having accelerated her emotional maturity in ways both impressive and somewhat sad. "You're up early for a Saturday," I observed as she settled into the chair beside mine. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted, pulling her knees to her chest. "Thinking about Mom's visitation today." The supervised visits remained a source of stress for Olivia, though she never suggested canceling them. Despite everything, she maintained a complicated love for her mother, tempered by new awareness of Tori's unhealthy patterns. "How are you feeling about it?" I asked gently. She shrugged one shoulder, a gesture that had become her trademark response to difficult emotions. The usual mix: dread, obligation, tiny hope that maybe this time will be different. She smiled. Faintly. "Dr. Carter says it's normal to keep hoping your parent will change, even when all evidence suggests otherwise." Dr. Carter's family therapy had been invaluable throughout this process. helping Olivia develop healthy boundaries while processing the complex emotions around her mother's behavior. "Your dad will be with you the whole time," I reminded her. The supervision arrangement required James to be present during Tori's visits with Olivia, a compromise that had initially seemed awkward, but had proven necessary given Tori's unpredictability. "I know." She sipped from my coffee cup, something she had taken to doing lately, small gestures of casual intimacy that reflected our strengthened bond. "I've been thinking about college applications." The abrupt subject change was typical of how Olivia handled stress, acknowledging difficult topics briefly before pivoting to something more manageable. "Any new schools on your list?" Her expression brightened. "Actually, yes. I'm adding Bowdoin in Maine. Their environmental science program looks amazing, and they have this cool interdisciplinary approach with marine biology." "Your grandfather would approve," I said, smiling at the connection to Richard's beloved Maine coastline, where we had spent summer vacations throughout the boys' childhood. "He always said the tide pools there taught more about ecosystems than any textbook could." "Dad mentioned that. He offered to take me to visit over winter break." Her eyes softened. "He's been really great through all this. More present than before." The observation held profound truth. James had indeed become more emotionally available, more authentically engaged with Olivia since the separation from Tori. Without the constant pressure to appease his wife's demands and expectations, he had reconnected with his natural parenting instincts. Patient, attentive, supportive. "Your father has always loved you deeply," I said. "Sometimes people need to remove obstacles before they can express that love fully." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "Like how he's happier at the community college than he ever was at the law firm, even though Mom would have hated that career change." James had made the transition to teaching 3 months ago, once the main financial aspects of the divorce were settled. The significant pay cut had been offset by equally significant gains in job satisfaction and work-life balance. His courses on business ethics and sustainable enterprise practices had quickly become student favorites. "Speaking of your dad," I said, hearing movement inside the house, "I think he's up." James appeared moments later, looking relaxed in casual weekend clothes, another change from the formal corporate attire Tori had insisted upon even on his days off. "Good morning, early birds." He kissed the top of Olivia's head, then squeezed my shoulder affectionately. "Coffee still hot?" "Should be," I confirmed. "There's plenty in the pot." As he went to pour himself a cup, Olivia called after him. "Dad, did you talk to Uncle Michael about Thanksgiving yet?" "Last night," James D. Sitz confirmed, returning with his coffee. "He's definitely coming, and bringing his new girlfriend too." This news raised my eyebrows. "Girlfriend? He didn't mention anyone when we spoke on Sunday." James grinned. "Apparently, it's recently official. Her name is Layla. She's an environmental lawyer, and according to Michael, terrifyingly brilliant." "About time," Olivia declared with teenage certainty. "Uncle Michael has been single forever." 4 years isn't forever," I corrected, amused by her perspective. "But I'm looking forward to meeting Layla." The prospect of Michael bringing someone special to our Thanksgiving gathering felt symbolic somehow, life continuing to unfold in new directions despite the upheaval of the past year. Our family was reconfiguring, healing, growing in unexpected ways. James settled into the third patio chair, stretching his legs comfortably. "Any big plans today before the visitation, Liv?" "Emma's picking me up for coffee and college essay." "Brainstorming," she replied. "Then I'll be back by noon." Emma Kim had remained Olivia's steadfast friend throughout the entire ordeal, providing normalcy and support when many other relationships had become complicated by the public nature of our family crisis. "Don't forget we're meeting the supervisor at the community center at 2, James reminded her gently. Olivia nodded, her momentary lightness fading slightly at the reminder of the afternoon's obligation. "I know. I'll be ready." After she left, to prepare for her morning with Emma, James turned to me with a more serious expression. "There's something I wanted to discuss with you, Mom, about the house." "Our living arrangement?" I asked, immediately concerned. Though James and Olivia had been staying with me for 6 months now, I had never considered their presence temporary or unwelcome. "No, nothing like that," he assured me quickly. "Unless you're eager to have your space back to yourself?" I shook my head firmly. "This arrangement works perfectly for me. I love having you both here." It was true. After 2 years of rattling around the house alone following Richard's death, the company of my son and granddaughter had brought welcome life and energy back to these rooms. Their presence didn't feel like an imposition, but rather a return to the home's true purpose: sheltering family, hosting conversations, witnessing growth and change. "Good, because we're in no rush to leave," James said, looking relieved. "But I've been thinking about your estate plans, specifically the provision about turning this house into transitional housing before eventually offering Olivia the option to purchase it. Has something changed your mind about that arrangement?" I asked, curious rather than defensive. "Not changed my mind," he clarified, "but I've had some ideas about how to enhance it. You know, I've been volunteering with the women's shelter downtown as part of my service learning course." I nodded, proud of how he had integrated community service into his new teaching role. "Well, they're desperately short on transitional housing options for women and children leaving abusive situations. Their current facilities are overcrowded, and funding for new housing is limited." His expression grew animated, revealing the passion he had discovered for this cause. "I started thinking about how your vision for this house could be expanded to specifically address that need." "Go on," I encouraged, intrigued by the direction of his thoughts. "What if, instead of waiting until after your lifetime, we established a foundation now? We could develop a detailed plan for converting this property into a transitional housing program specifically for domestic violence survivors. You could see your vision implemented, make adjustments based on real needs identified by the shelter, staff, even participate in creating the program." The idea resonated immediately, expanding and enhancing the concept I had originally envisioned. That would give the project much more specificity and impact, I agreed. "But what about your and Olivia's living situation?" "We could stay here until the program is ready to launch, maybe a year or 2 of planning and preparation. By then, Olivia will be in college, and I could find a small place nearby." He leaned forward, enthusiasm evident in his gestures. "The foundation could partner with the shelter, apply for matching grants, create something sustainable that outlasts all of us." I found myself equally excited by the possibilities. Richard would have loved this evolution of the idea. He always said wealth only matters when it creates positive impact. "Exactly," James smiled broadly. "And the irony isn't lost on me that this house, which Tori coveted so desperately as a status symbol and financial asset, could instead become a haven for women escaping situations similar to what she created." The poetic justice of this transformation struck me as both appropriate and healing. "Have you mentioned this to Olivia? Her future option to purchase the property would be affected." "We've discussed it in general terms. She actually suggested the domestic violence focus, given our family's experience." Pride colored his voice. "She said she'd rather see the house help people in crisis than become her inheritance." "She's remarkable," I said, my heart full, at this evidence of my granddaughter's compassion and wisdom. "She is," James agreed. "And she's healing. We all are." We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching golden leaves spiral down from the maple trees. The peaceful moment was interrupted by the chime of James's phone, a text message alert. His expression darkened as he read the screen. "It's from Tori. She's canceling today's visitation. Again. Third time in 2 months. I sighed, knowing how this would impact Olivia despite her ambivalence about the visits. What excuse this time? Work emergency, he replied, his tone making clear how little he believed this. I should tell Olivia before she leaves with Emma. She'll be disappointed but also relieved, which will then make her feel guilty. He shook his head sadly. The emotional gymnastics this puts her through are exhausting. Would you like me to tell her? I offered. Sometimes difficult news is easier from a grandparent. He considered this, then nodded gratefully. That might be better, thank you. When I broke the news to Olivia a few minutes later, her reaction was exactly as James had predicted, a complex mixture of disappointment, relief, and guilt. It's not your responsibility to manage your mother's choices, I reminded her gently. You've remained open to the relationship despite everything. That's all anyone could ask of you. She nodded, blinking back tears. I know. It's just, part of me still wants her to be the mom I thought she was. The one who helped me practice cello before recitals and made my Halloween costumes and told me I could do anything. I embraced her, feeling her lean into the comfort. Those good memories are real. They're part of your history with her. You don't have to discard them to protect yourself from the harmful patterns. Dr. Carter says the same thing, she admitted, pulling back with a watery smile. That people are complex, and I'm allowed to hold space for both the good and bad experiences with Mom. Dr. Carter is very wise, I said, smoothing a strand of hair from her face, a grandmother's gesture as old as time. After Olivia left, with Emma, their plans now extended to include lunch since the afternoon had been unexpectedly cleared, I found James in Richard's study. He was sorting through old photographs, creating a digital archive of family memories. How did she take it? He asked, looking up from the scanner. With remarkable maturity, I replied, settling into a chair across from him. She'll be fine. She and Emma are making a day of it now. He nodded, returning to his task. I found these pictures from our Maine vacations. Thought they might inspire Olivia's college essay about Baudouin. I leaned forward to see the images. James and Michael as teenagers, standing proudly beside a tide pool discovery. Richard pointing out constellations during a nighttime beach walk. A family picnic on the rocks, all of us sunburned and smiling. Those were wonderful summers, I said, nostalgia warming my voice. They were. James paused, studying a particular photo more closely. You know, I've been thinking about taking a sabbatical next summer, showing Olivia some of those places before she heads to college. She'd love that, I agreed. The cottage is still there, you know. I've kept the maintenance up, though I haven't visited since Richard passed. His expression brightened. Really? I thought you might have sold it after Dad died. I considered it, I admitted. But some places hold too many important memories to let go. I've been waiting for the right time to share it with the next generation. Maybe we could all go, James suggested. You, me, Olivia, Michael, and Layla too, if that's still happening by then. Recreate those family vacations for Olivia before she starts her next chapter. The prospect filled me with unexpected joy, not just the idea of returning to a beloved place, but of doing so with our reconfigured family, bringing our healing journey full circle. I'd like that very much, I said. James set down the photographs, his expression growing reflective. Sometimes I look back at everything that's happened since your hip surgery and estate plan changes, and I'm amazed at how completely our lives have transformed. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be divorced, teaching instead of practicing law, living with you, and helping plan a domestic violence housing program, I would have thought it was impossible. Life rarely follows the paths we expect, I agreed. But sometimes the unexpected turns lead exactly where we needed to go. I keep thinking about what Dad used to say, James continued, Money makes a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. Tori never understood that. For her, wealth was always the master she served, the goal that justified any means. He shook his head. I feel sorry for her in a way. She'll never know the satisfaction of using resources for genuine positive impact rather than status or power. His compassionate perspective impressed me. Despite everything Tori had done, the manipulation, the violence, the ongoing attempts to damage his reputation, James had moved beyond bitterness to a place of understanding, if not forgiveness. Your father would be proud of the man you've become, I said simply. I certainly am. He smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes in a way I hadn't consistently seen since before his marriage. That means everything, Mom. Later that evening, as the three of us gathered in the kitchen preparing dinner together, James chopping vegetables, Olivia mixing a marinade, me supervising the entire operation, I was struck by the comfortable rhythm we had established. This wasn't the family configuration I had envisioned in earlier years, yet it felt right, authentic in a way that our previous holiday gatherings with Tori's carefully controlled presentations never had been. My hip had healed completely. James's facial injuries had faded without a trace. Olivia's emotional wounds were healing more slowly but with steady progress. And our family bonds had not only survived Tori's attempts to fracture them, but had emerged stronger, more honest, more deeply rooted in shared values. The estate plan that had catalyzed this transformation would continue to evolve, reflecting our family's journey and the lessons we had learned. But its fundamental purpose remained unchanged, to ensure that material resources served meaningful goals, that wealth became a tool for positive impact rather than a source of conflict or control. As we sat down to dinner, the conversation, flowing easily between college applications, James's teaching experiences, and plans for Michael's upcoming visit, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for the physical assets that had become the focus of Tori's obsession, but for the intangible inheritance that truly mattered, the values, the relationships, the capacity for growth and resilience that would outlast any material possessions. This, I realized, was the legacy Richard and I had always intended to leave. Not just what we owned, but who we were and what we stood for. And despite the painful journey of the past year, that legacy had never been more secure. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.